Hello everyone, my name is Aisha. I'm here to give you a crash course in creating assets that'll make the teacher say wow even though you have no idea what you're doing. There's a lot of things, I suppose more what I found, hang on, just go to the next one. Hello, I'm a fourth year animation student in the games degree, also doing a double degree with geology, if you're wondering why there's photos of rocks on my desktop. So my experience with doing the animation degree for the games thing is that there's a lot of kind of behind the scenes design things which are kind of just principle across all visual media that they don't really teach you, but the teachers really go like, wow, if you know it. So that's kind of what my PowerPoint here is today. I'm just going to be going through some of the things that I think are important to know that the teachers don't teach you, and then I'll move into Maya to show you a bit of Maya because that's what you can use Blender. The teachers will just teach you Maya if you're in the animation degree. So I am actually a 2D centric artist, which is kind of frowned upon a little bit in the animation degree, but you can just be stubborn and do it if you want. And yeah, I like making edutainment games. So I'm going to start off with colors and color theory. Because it's important. So color theory is basically just a way of trying to categorize which colors look good together and for what reasons, and kind of the emotional ties behind them and stuff. So it's used a lot. I feel like it's talked about a lot, mostly in design, as in like, oh, my website, I want it to look like this. And then if you're going further back into like classical art and stuff, they talk about it quite a bit there. But yeah, it's important. It can apply to video games as well. So I'm sure you've seen stuff like this if you did art in high school or primary school or whatever. We've got the primary colours, which are red, blue, and yellow. They're quite often, at least in video games, used for protagonists. And you can't make them more or less, although you can tone them with each another. Then you have the secondary colours, which are orange, green, and purple. They can also come in different shades, depending on whether you add more red or blue or grey. And I've demonstrated this here with the Sonic cast. Who the hell remembers Babylon Rouge? Not me. I'm joking, I played Sonic Rider. So going through the colours, we've got red, which is pretty much the iconic, like, yes, colour. It's both used a lot for protagonists, like Mario, and then you've also got antagonists, that's the word. So the reason red is a real eye-drawing colour. Sorry, there's someone outside. Yeah. Come on in. Yep, okay. So red, from a biological standpoint, is recognised as a kind of intense colour. There's a word in Japanese which is yabai, because I studied Japanese back in the day, and it kind of just translates to an exclamation point. It can kind of be good, it can be bad, but basically that's kind of what red invokes, as you can see down the bottom. It's in monkeys, at least. You know, a monkey with a red butt or red cheeks is like, horny. But they could also be angry. So that's kind of why red makes people go, oh my God. Yep. Orange, which is secondary colour. It's got a lot of associations with positivity and fun and energy. It's not actually used a lot on its own, which is a shame. Like, I showed this to my brother with Samus down there, and he was like, yeah, I was looking at the red and blue. It's like, oh, okay. I like orange, but yeah, it's not used that much. Then we have yellow, another primary colour, which is associated again with happiness and warmth. It kind of has a lot of the same connotations as orange, and a lot of the times, like even here, I've used an orangey yellow rather than just a yellow or an orange. When it's combined with black, it commands a lot of attention, which is, as you can see here with Pikachu and Claude, and it's also why you see it on warning signs. So, because it makes you go, oh, it's got that good contrast. Moving on to green, you can't read it because the screen's so blown out, but I've got green is not a creative colour, which is a colour for plants and growth and, in video game sense, healing sort of thing. But it can also be a colour for your villains, especially if it's more of a yellowy green, as in limes, or a limey colour, which is more associated with envy and poison sort of thing. Disney uses it a lot for their villains. You've got blue, which worldwide, statistically, is the most popular colour in the world, which is why it's used a lot for protagonists in video game sense. And it has a lot of different meanings depending on how you tone and shade it. So, you know, calm and serene, or you could be sad, or it could be like a loyal blue, like more royal. And yeah, so blue is very popular. And finally, we've got purple, which is a very rare color in nature. It doesn't show up a lot, there's a lot of biological reasons behind that, but back in the day it used to be associated with royalty because the only way you could get it was from painstakingly harvesting it from seashells in Greece. So that's why it's associated with being rare, and that's associated it with being magic and mysterious because you don't see it a lot. So from the you have your primary colors and your secondary colors, and then you can combine them all together to get tertiary colors, which is like, you've got red and orange, and you can have a reddy orange or a limey kind of green. And from this, you can kind of start considering color harmony, which is more the kind of, it's like, how do I combine these colors to look nice together? So we've got analogous colors, which are when you pick colors that are close to each other on the color wheel. It kind of gives it a more softer feel, and you normally pick one color to dominate and the other two would kind of complement it. On the other side, you've got complementary colors, which are formed from contrasting sides of the wheel. They feel a lot more dynamic and kind of balanced because you pick some from both sides. And you can kind of get away with them more being like using the same amounts. So another important part is moving towards warm colors or cool colors, and that can also change the association with the colors. So here we've got a health potion that's vanished because the screen's so blown out. But if you added warm to it, it would be like, oh, that kind of looks a bit like mucus. I don't think I want to drink that. Whereas if you add cool, at least in video game kind of terminology, that's normally for like a health potion deluxe sort of thing, at least in the RPGs I play. What about black and white? Because they are also important, but technically it's confusing. They use the word tones to describe like 10 different things in color theory, but technically you would call black and white tones, and they're kind of neutral, and you usually complement them with additional colors, although they do have their own association. So black is kind of death and sophistication and authority, whereas white is a lot more purity, peace and righteousness and telling the two dragons to fight each other. Brown can also be a neutral color, but you can also make that your dominant color if you want. So as we can see here, you can also have warm and cool varieties of black and white, and screen is warm tinted, so it doesn't look that noticeable, but cool. So to look here has got warm colors to symbolize that, hey, he's a fire user, cool. And then Kaya has cooler blacks to complement his kind of purple-blue aesthetic. So this is more to do with like Eoli actually painting things, as talking about like, it's like, okay, I have this one color, I'm going to add, what do I add to it to make different things, but still kind of useful in digital art. So you start with your hue, which is your pure color. If you add black to it, you're turning it into a shade. If you're adding white, you're turning it into a tint. And if you're adding grey, you're toning it, which tone is also what you call black and white. So it's just composing like that. So a shading tip, this works especially well for cartoony styles, is that normally you'd want to use a cooler variant of your original hue for your shading and a warmer hue for your highlighting. That's the word. Again, I don't know how much you guys can see from here because it looks really blown out to me. Okay, so if you're doing IGB 100, you probably would have done color palettes and mood boards. It's an important thing that they talk about a lot. So picking a mood board can be a really good way of kind of solidifying what you're pursuing with your character, because the more like connected all your ideas are, the more cohesive it will look in the end project, normally. So you can't just, well, I guess it depends on how you want to approach the design thing. So sometimes I don't know what I want to do color-wise, and there's websites like coolers.co and Adobe Color Wheel where you can just go in and just mash the space button and look at random color palettes and be like, yeah, that one's cool, and base something off that. Or you can go in there with, it's like, yeah, you know, I want to do, or here I've gone with the example of, it's like, I want to do a deep sea theme, and then I just went in there and spammed in there and I was like, I'm looking for blues sort of thing. So there's different ways of approaching it, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So ta-da, mood boards are important. You can go and like be like, yeah, you know, I want it to look kind of like that and kind of like that, and just collect a bunch of images that make you think like, okay, this is what I'm kind of working towards. So from this, this is my HB 100 project, so I was actually making a game about post and fish, so I kind of wanted to put a red in there just to symbolize it's like, post. So I ended up changing the colors around a bit, but they were still analogous, and that gave good color theory cohesion. Moving on to design. So another important thing that people kind of just process subconsciously without really thinking about it, but is really important in design, is shapes. So the different shapes have different associations, but normally you can just break them down into squares, triangles, and circles. This is mostly talked about in terms of character design, but can also be important for like architectural design, and because you don't normally see solid shapes like that out in the wild, so it can be a good juxtaposition for your like natural landscapes and stuff. So squares are sturdy shapes. They have strong associations with being stable or strong or orderly and kind of balanced, which is like, you have a square, it's like, I can't squish this. Triangles are active shapes, which can be taken either like in a good way, that's like, yeah, enthusiastic and harmonious, or it can also be aggressive and kind of, oh no, like warning signs. That's why they're triangles. And then circles, on the other hand, are friendly shapes because they don't have any edges, and that kind of makes them like, oh, that's friendly. They've also got representations of unity and community, So this is also broken down more in line shapes as well, which is mostly subdivided into angular and then rounded. So angular feels a lot more unnatural and kind of threatening for monkey brain because, you don't see sharp objects that often in the wild. And if you do, it's like, oh no, it's pointed at me, it's going to come. Angular shapes are usually associated, this is a bit outdated, with being masculine. That's just technical, ye olde art stuff. It doesn't matter that much anymore. Meanwhile, rounded shapes are a lot more friendly and preferred, not for any particular reason from studies I was looking at, mostly just because people have a dislike of angular, so by proxy they like rounded shapes better, and it's got more associations with being feminine. So when you're designing your character, it's great to just go in there and do stuff, but a bit of planning beforehand can really save you a lot of trouble. So knowing what I'd normally start with is what kind of world is your character going to be existing in? And that doesn't have to be complicated. Like you can just start with something really basic. Like so for here, I'm using something I did for IGV 200 as an example. I had to make a game in an office, which was kind of boring, compared to, oh my God, deep sea adventures and all this, and it's like office game. It's like, great, cool. So knowing I was designing for an office, I kind of thought about like what sort of characters would be in an office, Would you have bosses and like, the secretaries and the co-workers and that weird IT technician who hides in the corner and doesn't talk to you? I'm saying that because that was me. So once you have an idea of what sort of characters fit into your world, you can kind of refine it more into it's like, okay, I want to make a boss character. What sort of person do I think would be a boss? Would you have someone who's like, yeah, I'm going to climb the ladder, the office ladder, and be the boss, and, kind of career-orientated person? Or if you got someone who's just ended up in the job because there was no one else around, it's like, oh, well, I've been here for long enough, I guess I'm a boss now. And I kind of think about this if you guys have played The Sims a lot and you're trying to make a rebalance, like a sim that makes sense. That's kind of how I approach it. Sims 3, when you have like actual lots of traits to pick from. So once you have a good idea of your character, or some general ideas of your characters in terms of their personality and the world they exist in and stuff, that can give you an easier time determining what sort of shapes and colors you want to pick. So some things to consider that I'd kind of just break it down into just things off the top of your head to consider. Are they a protagonist or an antagonist, or just some NPC in the background you're going to see once and then they disappear from the game? Are they extroverted or introverted? Are they stoic or really excitable? How willing are they to be like, yep, I'm going to help some random old man that's fallen into the river or something, Are they confident in what they're doing? And then you can add things like, oh, what are their hobbies, Maybe a fisherman has a fish on his shirt or something, It doesn't have to be deep. So based on the boss thing, I made this lady, boss lady. So she's constructed mostly out of rectangles and triangles because I wanted to show her as being reliable and diligent, and the triangles kind of add a bit of like, ooh, activeness, but also like, you know, maybe she's a bit dangerous with the green in her outfit as well. I chose the bluey green as her accent color because it's a good complementary color for orange, and I picked orange because I like orange mostly. Don't know if you could tell because the PowerPoint's orange. But yeah, another important thing that can add a lot of depth to your character is picking a name. So a name says a lot of stuff about a character, and you know, it's not like you're naming your kid that you have no idea what their personality is going to be like in 20 years. Like, you know this character, you made them, you can give them a name that really fits them. Word of advice: don't pick Alex as your gender-neutral protagonist name. We had 4 games with gender-neutral protagonists in IGP 200, and it was a bit mad. So yeah, I'm not saying don't pick it ever, but it's a funny thing that happened. So thinking about your character's personality and background can give you a good idea to pick their names. Baby name websites are a good place to start, or, you know, there's tons of D&D name generators if you want something really weird. I think my brother made his D&D character's name out of like a Wu-Tang Clan name generator and just removed some vowels. I don't know. Puns are also fun. Everyone appreciates a good pun, I think, at least. So we've got some examples here. We've got Kaya again from Genshin Impact. His last name is Alberic, which is the German version of Oberon, aka King of the Fairies, which suits him. He kind of, personality-wise and in the game, he's hinted at kind of being a king of the fairies. We've got Melia Antiqua from Xenoblade 1. Xenoblade Normal, I don't know. Her name, Melia and Antiqua, translates into Ancient Ash Tree, and that kind of has associations with Yggdrasil, which was famously the world tree from Norse mythology, which is kind of a hub of magic and mysticals and all this stuff, which suits her because she's a magic user. And then we have Gordy from Pokemon Sword and Shield, because he dresses gaudily, and then he also sounds like Gord, which his mum has the complimentary name Melanie, which has melon in it, so melon and pumpkin basically, which is like, haha, very funny, Game Freak, I see what you did. I forgot that slide was in there. That was just an example for a character I was, it won't let me go back. Okay, that was basically an example for a character I was making who was kind of fire related, and I gave her the name Anna Aurelius, which Aurelius is a Latin name, which translates to the golden one, and then Enna is a Gaelic name, which is the feminine form of Iden, which is basically a small flame. So it's put them together, it's kind of roughly the golden spark, which is like, ooh, a fire name, cool. Bonus, just some little tidbits that I thought were interesting. Some helpful exercises if you're not that familiar with art, or if you just want to do something fun. So first we've got, you can find these all on YouTube, random shape challenge, which is basically someone's done it here with watercolors. You just blob down some random shapes and be like, okay, try to design a character around those shapes. So we can see here she's turned the weird S one into a bird, or that long one into a frog, or a ladybug that's stretching itself, I don't know, jellyfish. Another thing that I remember doing this in year 7, and I don't think I've seen it anywhere else since, is that you draw a picture, I think we did faces, and then you try to draw the same picture again, but only using curved lines, no straight lines allowed, and then repeat the process with only straight lines, and that kind of gives you an idea if it's like, oh my god, you know, shows you how much you rely on each different type. Like, personally, I like mostly straight lines that have curved corners, sort of thing. And then another one would be anthropomorphizing. So basically you pick a bunch of things that aren't humans and try to develop a character around them, sort of thing. So I think I had here, I was messing around with some plants. We've got a fig and a tomato, and I don't know what that one in the middle is. And basically just trying to turn that into a character, add some more human elements to it. Animation is an important thing that you probably won't know anything about by the time you get to IGP 100, because that comes later. But the teachers are usually quite impressed when you add animation, even if it's very basic. So yeah, so if you want to add animation, but there's no time because the sprints are so short, can't be asked to draw those damn frames, Unity has solutions for that. So here's what I did for IGP 200. This is the basic premise of this is the same thing they use for VTubers, if anyone watches them. But basically, what you do is you give parameters to a bunch of 2D images, and that can add a bit of flow and movement and lets them move around, which, you know, it's not the best thing in the world, what I did, because I did that very quickly, but just having a bit of animation can really spruce up your game. So this is what I've done here, is basically taken each separate part of this character and drawn it individually, well, kind of like having it all lined up. So think of it kind of as making a puppet, I suppose, is the best way to think about it. And a texture is just something I personally quite like. So what I've just done here is applied a piece of paper texture over the top of it and just done it as like darken or multiply or something. It's a great way of giving your like 2D assets a bit of depth to it, make it look a little less flat, and it's good for crafty looks if you want to make Yoshi's Woolly World or whatever. Yeah, here's some examples. It adds a bit of differentiation between the characters in the front and the background, which is just screenshots. I couldn't be bothered to draw it.